Welcome back to Starkiller Base. It's time for another Spirit of the Rebellion card analysis video. This time we're going for the yellow heroes. So let's get underway here. We'll start off with Chewbacca. He is a loyal friend. He has 12 hit points. His die sides read a 1 ranged, a 2 ranged for 1, a 2 melee, a 1 resource, a special, and a blank. He's 12 and 16 points. His special reads turn an opponent's die to a side showing damage to deal that damage to a character. So he's definitely very interesting. He's got a ton of hit points, and putting him in at 12 points with 1 die for 12 hit points is pretty fantastic. He's got 4 damage sides effectively. A little bit of it is mixed and a little bit of it is a pay side, so his dice aren't the best. So his special is really interesting. You can turn an opponent's die to a side showing damage and then deal the damage to a character. The issue you have, of course, is that now your opponent's die is showing damage. So what do? Well, obviously, if you can turn it to a side showing damage and then finish the character off so that the character die goes away, then that's ideal. You can do things like turning an unmodified damage side to a modified damage side, hitting the character for that damage and then leaving them with no unmodified sides to resolve the dice with. It's rather interesting. You can also do something like, let's take Chewbacca's die for example. Turn his 2 melee to a 2 range for 1 when he's got no resource to pay for it. You could turn his 2 melee to a 1 range so that you take 1 less damage, or that he can't connect with modified melee sides, or that you don't lose hunker down or something like that. So his special is really interesting. I think it's a lot of fun, and I think it's pretty versatile. And of course, being a character that has a special on his dice, you sort of want to run him with 2 dice. There's characters like Akbar that have passive abilities that doesn't matter whether you have 1 or 2 dice because the ability is just as good. But of course, then there's characters that have specials on the die, which means that if you have 2 dice, you're twice as likely to get the special. So he's kind of interesting. You can put him in with Leia or Han. I mean, Chewbacca and Han's pretty fun from the sounds of it. He's got a lot of options. Next we have Jyn Erso, the Reckless Operative. She has 11 hit points. Her die sides show a 2 ranged, a 2 ranged, a 1 discard, a 2 discard, a 1 resource, and a blank. She's a 15/20, so she's pretty pricey. Her character ability reads, the cost of the first yellow event you play each round is decreased by 1. So that's a really interesting ability. You can play electroshocks for free and that sort of thing. The one thing you have to be careful of is that if you play a 0 cost yellow event as the first event you played in the round, you lose her ability because it decreases it by 1, can't go below 0, and then the second one that you play, if it costs 1, you still pay 1 because her ability's been used up. She's an interesting character. I really like being able to do damage and have hand control, so I'm excited to pair her up with Akbar. But from what I've seen on TTS of the people that have played games with that pairing, it doesn't seem to do all that well. You can throw out a second chance on her and do some ammo belt shenanigans so that she seems to live forever. But in the end, she's got a lot of damage, and the discard sides are nice. I mean, it prevents your opponent from re-rolling, and if you're playing with Akbar, then you'll trigger his ability more often. It's not really a dedicated mill deck. It's not really a dedicated damage deck, so it's kind of tricky to find the balance of what you need to do with them. Next, we have Maz Kanata, the Pirate Queen. She has 8 hit points. Her die sides show a 1 ranged, a 1 focus, a 1 focus, a 1 shield, a resource, and a blank. And she's an 8/11, so she has the same cost as Balatik, which is pretty great because he opens up a lot of deck building opportunities for the villains. So her character ability reads, after you activate this character, you may resolve up to 2 of your dice. So she's really interesting. She makes the deck really fast. If you roll Maz in and you get a focus on her die, let's just say you had Jyn next to her, then you can say, okay, I've rolled in Maz. I'm going to trigger her after ability. I will choose to resolve the first die. It's going to be the focus. I'll focus Jyn's die to something interesting, and then I'll resolve my second die, and it'll be Jyn's die. There's been a lot of people playing Elite Maz, Elite Poe, which is definitely a good pairing. Yellow brings a lot of interesting cards for Poe to throw at people with his special, and Maz can do what I just said, resolve the focus on her die, and then focus Poe's die to a special, and then resolve Poe's die. And this is all just from rolling in, so you're not giving your opponent an opportunity to mitigate the die or remove it or anything like that. So she's very, very powerful. I mean, her dice alone don't do all that much, although I'm a big fan of focus. But her character ability is just ridiculous, and her cost is great. So she's definitely one to look out for, and I can't wait to put her in all kinds of decks. Next, we have the Outer Rim Smuggler. This is the non-unique yellow hero card. He has 7 hit points. His dice show a 1 ranged, a 2 ranged, a 1 disrupt, a 1 discard, 1 resource, a blank. And they cost 8. The character ability reads, after you play the last card from your hand, gain 1 resource. I'm not particularly enamored with these guys. They're basically like a rebel trooper with a different ability, same kind of cost, same kind of hit points. Personally, I'd rather run a hired gun because their damage is ridiculous. But if you have a deck where your cost curve is higher, then running a hired gun die that you have to pay for all the time is not very practical. One thing we've seen in testing, I guess you could call it, is that people have been talking about running 2 Outer Rim Smugglers with a blue character and then playing an infinite loop by putting out Return of the Jedi in your discard pile and then using Return of the Jedi to return Return of the Jedi to your hand, because you're paying 1 to play the card, and because you play the last card from your hand, you gain a resource, but you've got 2 of them, so you get 2 resources, and then you can just do it again and again and again and again and again and again. And as long as these guys aren't dead, you can effectively get yourself infinite numbers of resources. So having infinite money is really good, but if you end up with like Outer Rim Smuggler, and Rey, I don't see the deck being all that fantastic. But, you know, you can pay for reversals and all that sort of stuff. And people are saying that you could technically just choose to repeatedly play that over and over again until you run out of time on the round. And if you had more damage done to your opponent, then you just win. Hopefully that doesn't happen because that just sounds awful. One of the things that Lucas Litzinger was saying in all of his interviews at the start of Destiny was that the one thing he wanted to avoid was cheap recursion. And I guess this is cheap recursion. The Hyperloop is another example of it. So hopefully it doesn't become too prevalent in the game because it just takes the fun out of it, frankly. Next we have the Smuggling Freighter. It is a 1 cost support. It is a vehicle. Its die sides show a 1 disrupt, a 2 disrupt, a 1 resource, a 2 resource, a blank, and a blank. And the ability on the card says, after you resolve one of this die's sides showing a value of 2, place this support on top of your deck. So it's sort of a temporary thing. If you play it out for 1 and you resolve the die showing a 2 resources, it's a forced ability basically. You have to put it back on top of your deck. And then you get it again, I guess. I mean, it sounds like it's going to slow your deck down, and it's going to make it so that your deck doesn't draw the cards that you really want because the Smuggling Freighter keeps getting put on top. So I'm not a fan. I mean, a 1 cost support isn't too bad, but I mean, it doesn't really do all that much as far as I'm concerned. Next, we have the Bowcaster. This is a legendary. It's a 4 cost upgrade weapon. 4 cost. That's pretty beefy. Its die sides show a 2 ranged, a 4 ranged for 1, a +3 ranged, a 2 disrupt, a special, and a blank. It has redeploy, which is fantastic. The special reads, deal 1 unblockable damage to each of up to 2 different characters. So it has 4 damage sides. The special is not all that interesting. I don't really like it. But, you know, I guess unblockable damage isn't bad. You know, all the number of times where my opponents had a hit point or 2 left and shielded up, and I've been able to play out a backup muscle and kill them. This sort of serves that same purpose. The damage sides on this thing are pretty nasty. I mean, it costs 4, so they better be pretty good, but 4 range damage for 1 unmodified is pretty fantastic. If you've got an overkill or a jetpack with this thing, you can do 7 damage for 1 resource. And if you kill the character, it has redeploy. I mean, unless Grievous is around to steal it from you, it's pretty amazing. Every other upgrade that costs 4 is generally one that goes away when you lose the character, so being able to toss it around is pretty fantastic. Next we have Lone Operative. It is a 3 cost upgrade ability. The die sides show a 2 melee, a 2 discard, a 1 resource, a special, and a blank. The special reads, heal 2 damage from attached character or 3 damage instead if attached character is your only character in play. If you're like me and you've played as or against Han Rey decks and had Han cycling through second chances over and over again and living forever, you can see how Lone Operative can benefit Han there by increasing his ability to do so by rolling specials and healing himself. It's definitely interesting in, I mean, it could be interesting in a deck like that, or you could put it in a mill deck. It's got a 2 discard side and it keeps the character alive longer, so I could see Padme benefiting from this card a lot. And in the case of a Padme Trooper deck, Padme will probably be the last character alive because the troopers always kill themselves with Guardians, so the special will probably be healing 3. Putting it on a Jin in a Jin Akbar or a Jin Rebel Commando deck would be less good because chances are they're going to kill Jin first, and they probably should. So it's not going to be as useful, but healing 2 is never a bad thing. Next we have Maz's Goggles. This one is a 1 cost upgrade equipment. Its die sides show a 1 focus, a 2 focus, a resource, a special, and a blank. It is unique. It reads, to play, spot a yellow character, which means it doesn't have to go on a yellow character, but you have to have a yellow character to put it into play, so it's pretty versatile. The special reads, look at an opponent's hand and discard an event from it. When I saw this card in the fan originally, I figured that the ability on it must have been a downside, because paying 1 for a die that good had to have a downside to it. It apparently doesn't, and just Spirit of the Rebellion is that much better. The special on it is amazing. You look at an opponent's hand and discard an event from it, so it's sort of like Scout, but has different criteria to it. Scout is you have to discard the cheapest cost card, but it doesn't have to be an event, whereas this one lets you get rid of any event. So the number of times where I played against a deck that had endless ranks, and I wish I could do something to get rid of endless ranks from their hand, Maz's Goggles can do it for you. So you can get rid of Rise Again, endless ranks, all kinds of expensive events that your opponent's been saving to play at a later time. You know, worst case scenario, you're just getting rid of an event. I mean, it can be a cheap event that you don't want to get hit with. It's effectively a mill card too. Not to mention the 2 focus and the 2 resources. I can't say enough about this card. I think it's one of the best cards in the set. I know that sounds strange, but for the type of playstyle I like, it really, really, really fits. Definitely a good one, and I can't wait to grab 2 out of my boxes. So let's move on to the cards that don't come with dice. First, we have Garbage'll Do. It's a 0 cost event. It has ambush. Remove 1 of your vehicle dice to give each one of your characters a shield. That's kind of interesting. I like that it has ambush, so it synergizes with Han. I like that it's 0 cost. I guess removing a smuggling freighter die would be useful, but usually vehicle dice are really expensive, so the title of the card gives you a hint that you should be using garbage vehicles in order to use this card. I suppose if you had an expensive vehicle that had a blank, if it even has a blank on the die, then you could use it. I'm not sure about this one. I guess you'd want to run it in maybe a Han deck with 3 characters, like a Han hired gun. But if you want to build a deck with it and let me know how it works out, let me know. Next we have Hold On. It's a 0 cost event, another event with ambush here. Move in a number of shields from one of your characters to another character. So again, synergizes with Han, keeps your deck fast with ambush, and it allows you to move shields around. So if you've got a character that's got shields like Han, let's say you're doing a Han Rey deck, right? And Rey's getting beat on and Han's got full shields, then you can use Hold On to move shields over to Rey, which would then give you a shield on Han from the ambush, and you can start generating shields back up on him, and you can play riposte and that sort of thing. It's interesting. I like the shenanigan level, but I'm not sure how useful it'll be. Next we have a 1 cost event that I don't know how to pronounce it. It's either Rebel or Rebel, depending on whether it's a verb or a noun. It says play only if you have 1 or more dice showing a discard. Play a card from your discard pile, decreasing its cost by 1. So it synergizes well with Jin, who has 2 discard sides on her dice. Playing cards from your discard pile is always useful, and the fact that it decreases the cost by 1 is also useful. I mean, it's sort of like a rearm, but it doesn't have a color restriction, doesn't have a hard type restriction, and it has more of a restriction in that you have to have a discard side showing. It's definitely interesting if you're looking to recycle things like Second Chance or a gun that got discarded because a mill deck hit your hand or something like that, then it could be useful. Next we have Long Con. It is a 0 cost event. It reads, gain 3 resources if there's another copy of this event in your discard pile. We've seen these cards before, except this one actually has no effect at all if this is the first time you've played it. Other ones would be like, gain a resource, and then if there's another copy of this event in your discard pile, gain 2 resources or something like that, right? But this one, the first time you play it, it does nothing. So you're actually better off to discard it for a reroll than to actually play it as an event. The unfortunate part about it for me is that you want resource cards to help you ramp up throughout the start of the game. So if you don't see the second one of this early on, then it's not going to be as useful. I mean, at the end of the game, if you get a bunch of resources, it's all well and good. But you want to have the resources early to be playing out these extra upgrades and extra dice and that sort of thing so that you can use them to generate you damage and resources and whatever else your deck is looking for. I don't really like this card. I know that there are ways that you can expedite the use of it by, using Maz's Castle or Scavenge. Is it worth it? Probably not. So next we have Loth, Cat, and Mouse. It is a 0 cost event. It reads, force an opponent to choose and remove 1 of your dice, then remove 1 of their dice. So this, to me, is probably how he doesn't like you should have been worded. He doesn't like you is that you basically remove your worst die to remove your opponent's best die. This one, you end up losing your best die, and then you get rid of their best die. They have a similar effect, but Loth Cat and Mouse to that degree is significantly worse. However, it is apples and oranges because we're looking at heroes versus villains. So you can definitely use it to some strong effect. Say you roll in a character that has bad dice, like Rey, and your opponent rolls in Vader, you can remove one of your Rey dice because your opponent would have to pick one of them, and then you get to get rid of the 3 melee or something like that. Or if you're running a mill deck, like a Padme Trooper, do you really care which one of your dice gets removed as long as you can get rid of the opponent's die that's about to kill you? Probably not. So it's definitely interesting. The 0 cost is fantastic. And of course, you can't play it when you don't have any dice to remove because of the then in there. If the stuff before the then doesn't happen, then the stuff after the then can't happen. So next we have Never Tell Me the Odds. It is a 3-cost event, which is pretty pricey. It reads, choose one of your yellow characters, turn any number of its character and upgrade dice to sides of your choice. So it definitely has a powerful effect. Playing it on something like Han, when he's got a couple of DL44s, could absolutely destroy just about anyone in the game. It works well with Jin as well, because she could play it for 2. The one problem, of course, is that turning the dice is powerful, but not being able to resolve them immediately afterwards is less powerful. However, there's a card called Infamous, which gives the next yellow card you play Ambush. You could play this out, give Han a shield, you could turn your dice to whatever you want on Han there, and then you can also resolve them. Now, one thing to note, of course, is that it's restricted to yellow characters, but it's not restricted to yellow upgrades. So you could have red weapons or blue weapons or whatever on them and go to town. So that's definitely an interesting card, and if you've got a deck that can afford it, then it can do some serious work. Next we have Planned Explosion. Oh my goodness, I cannot say enough interesting things about this card. It is a 0-cost event. Play only if you have dice showing a combined value of 10 or more. Remove all your dice and deal 10 damage to a character. Woo! You can build a deck that can handle this pretty well, and admittedly, if you've got dice showing a combined value of 10 or more, you're probably going to be able to do around 10 damage to a character by resolving those dice, maybe. But this doesn't care whether they're focuses or resources or modified melee damage and regular range damage or whatever, pay sides you can't afford. I played against someone that was trying to build a deck to maximize the use of this card, and they were going Mon Mothma Elite with 2 hired guns, and they were able to Plan Explosion their way to glory at our pre-release tournament in Toronto. I lent Plan Explosion to one person that was playing a Han Rey deck, and I lent a Mon Mothma die to another person that was playing the Mon Mothma hired gun, and after the 5 rounds of Swiss, they were first and second. So it obviously works out pretty well. I mean, I guess people don't see it coming necessarily, but there are counters to it. If you did something like Mind Trick, you could get rid of half their dice and they'd lose the ability. If you use Scout or Friends in Low Places, or as we saw above, Maz's Goggles, you can pull Planned Explosion out of their hand. So it's definitely an interesting card. If it gets discarded from a mill deck, then it's really unfortunate. I guess you could use Cheat to bring it back into your hand if you were relying on it, or if you wanted to blow up a 3rd character after having played it twice. I like this card a lot, and I sort of think of it as being the hero version of Crime Lord. So it's definitely interesting. It would be fantastic if you could pull this off in a mill deck. Villain mill decks have a secondary win condition by having Dooku with lightsabers kill a guy off, or Crime Lords or something like that. So having a Padme Trooper deck or some combination that has decent sides, use a Planned Explosion to kill off one character and then just mill and control the other ones that are remaining. It would be pretty fantastic. Of course, Padme's dice are awful for Planned Explosion because 3 of her sides are 0s. So it's probably best used in a deck like Akbar hired gun, or Mon Mothma hired gun, or a Han Rey, because those decks actually, without any upgrades, have the potential to get 10 value on their dice from the start. So theoretically, you could play Planned Explosion turn 1. Next, we have Double Dealing. It is a 1-cost support. It reads, after one of your dice rolls a special, you may exhaust this support to gain a resource. It's a pretty interesting card. I mean, gaining resources over and over again is pretty great. And it's one of those ones that doesn't slow down your deck. So obviously you want to put it in a deck that has a lot of specials. So, a Padme deck with Cunning and Lone Operative and that sort of thing, maybe. Chewbacca could take advantage of it. And of course, it doesn't have to be a yellow character. So if you were to put a deck together that had characters from multiple colors that all had specials, like Luminar Unduli and Chewbacca, then you could actually make some pretty serious coin by having double dealing out there, and especially since you can have 2 of them. So it's pretty interesting. I'd give it a try. So next we have Life Debt. It is a 0 cost upgrade. It reads yellow character only. After you activate this character, you may move 1 damage from another character to this character. This ignores shields. It's sort of like a draw attention that's repeatable. So you could put this out on Chewbacca in a Han Chewie deck, and then every time you activate Chewbacca, you could move a damage from Han to Chewie to keep Han alive longer. I guess it's sort of like a Guardian in a sense. Unfortunately, my first reaction is, okay, well, does this work in a deck to keep Padme alive longer? And yes, it kind of does. I guess you could go for a Padme hired gun Rebel Trooper or a Padme Outer Rim Smuggler Rebel Trooper in that sense. And then you've got the Guardian on the Rebel Trooper, and then you could put Life Debt on the yellow non-unique. I think that I'm going to try to build a deck that can be as annoying as possible with Life Debts and Field Medics and draw attentions and just move damage around. I mean, an Akbar hired gun has 27 hit points, and you can keep people alive for a long time doing that. I mean, if you've got a second chance on a yellow character, then you probably don't mind moving damage over to it away from somebody that doesn't. It definitely has some potential. That wraps up our yellow hero cards from the Spirit of the Rebellion. If you liked the video, please do like and subscribe so we continue to bring you Destiny content. Keep an eye out for the next video coming soon, and thanks for watching, everybody.